Let's see. Hi guys. I'm just gonna cast a file from my desktop today.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And so you still have to,
Go on the internet
yeah,
and go here.
3 dots, yep.
Cast.
Sources.
Oh, that's training on TV, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
Perfect.
and then the Zoom, it's probably still set up to your computer video. Yeah, so, I mean, it's coming out of your computer, which is fine, but it should be also probably coming out of the, so click on the microphone real quick.
Okay.
Sweet.
Hi guys, can someone at home please give me a hello so I can make sure we're up and running?
Hello.
Hi. Nice to see you all.
Hey.
All right, so it's nice to see you. The new residential purchase agreement is not too difficult. It clarifies some things, makes it a little easier. I think it lays out some information in a couple different ways. There are a whole lot of other forms that have changed as well that I've reviewed for the better. These are not forms we commonly use, but at my next class, I will give out a link with a package for it. And I happen to know that Michael Rosales, our broker, just sent out an email to everyone in the office with links to what we're going to review today and all the other documentation that's been changed as well. Okay, so unless anyone has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to break this class into 2 parts because we're going to spend a lot of time on it and I didn't want to rush through it. So we'll get it through as much as we can today, and next week we'll pick up where we left off and we'll finish it off. We'll keep that class going until we're completely through it. Any questions? No? Okay. Let me screen share for those of you at home. Can everyone at home see the new RPA?
Yes.
Close the door, please. Thank you. I'm gonna minimize this box. I wanna let you guys that are watching on Zoom know that I do not pay attention to chat box. So if you have a question, please don't be shy. I like a really interactive class. I encourage you to interrupt me, stop me. I use acronyms a lot because I've been doing this a long time and I came from Escrow and we use acronyms for everything, but that's not what I wanna do when I speak to you guys. So stop me, remind me. If you feel like I've made an error, a lot of times I'll say listing agent or seller when I mean buyer. Please do, don't be shy. We're here to learn this together. So with that said, no chat box questions. Guys at home, please speak up. All right. So as you can see, we now have a new date here, 12/21. Technically, this document should be live, up and running, and every time you write an offer from December 14th on, I believe, is when this form will replace our previous RPA. And it looks very similar. None of the information has changed too much, just a lot of formatting changes and some additions. So top left is date prepared. This is a legal reference date for the residential purchase agreement. This is not the date of acceptance. No contingencies or closing is not calculated from this date. This is not the date that the buyer signs the residential purchase agreement. This is not the date that the seller accepts or counters it. This is simply a reference date. So should you be lucky enough to get your offer accepted, this legal reference date is often referred to on subsequent documents that are used during your escrow or transaction. Okay, so this date is important to you, but I don't want you guys to confuse it with calculating closing or contingency timeframes from it. All right, this is an offer from, so this is where your buyer's name is going to go. So a buyer can write an offer in the name of an individual, multiple individuals, or an entity. So an entity would be something like an LLC or a corporation. I do want you to keep in mind that, or a trust. I do want you to keep in mind that most lenders have an issue with lending to entities, not all of them. So if your buyer wants to make an offer in the name of an entity and not a natural person, please check with their lender before you do so. Not that these things can't be changed through escrow. In fact, there's an addition to the residential purchase agreement that we'll review shortly. I think on page 2 somewhere, that talks about assignment timeframes. Assignment has a lot of different terminology and names, and we'll go over that. I don't want you to think assignment is something I'm talking about where I enter into contract and I randomly assign it to Gabby, the purchase to Gabby. That is still not allowed. Assignment is simply transferring my transaction, my accepted purchase agreement to my entity. Has to be an entity that the buyer who's named on the contract, or vice versa, the entity that's named on the contract is one and the same. The owner and the entity are the same parties. Okay, if that makes any sense, the controlling party to the entity. All right. Again, with buyer, especially with husband and wife, this is where I see errors. Guys, you don't say Mr. and Mrs. John Smith. You don't say Jane and John Smith. The contract, even if they have the same last name, should say John Smith and Jane Smith. So that's another thing I like to point out. The property to be acquired is. So this is going to be the property address. It's very important that you put the legal city in here. And this can be misleading. So Los Angeles is very large and we have a lot of what are called area names. For instance, North Hollywood, Sherman Oaks, Brentwood, Venice. These are all actually city of LA. Hollywood is LA. However, West Hollywood, funny enough, is its own city. So where can we find this information, guys? When you're in doubt if what the legal city is, who can we ask? Title, your title rep, exactly. You can also, if you get into title records, get access to the legal description, there'll be some language that says something like, you know, lot 34 in block, blah, 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 of tract located in the city of, those key words. And if you see this type of language in the city of, that will also tell you what the legal city is. All right. Zip code, and then assessor parcel number, also referred to as APN. Guys, please do not leave APN blank. I see this very often on offers. An APN number is very important. It is more of an identification to escrow, title, sometimes the lender, than our, the address we're familiar with using is. Okay, so APN is very important. We can find this on the MLS. We can find this on public records, a legal description from the title company. It's listed on the MLS listing usually as well. With a few rare exceptions, oftentimes if you are making an offer on new construction, you might not find an APN number because it may not be finalized yet. So that might be an exception. If property has recently been subdivided or combined, and what do I mean by that? Subdivision is when a legal lot, which is identified by an APN number, is purchased, and then there's a legal process where it's broken out into many, and then more than one home can be built on these separate lots and sold individually. Another exception would be if you are dealing with a condo that's located on a land lease. Okay, does anyone know what a land lease is? Who does know what a land lease is? Who doesn't? Yeah, okay. So a land lease is where the HOA does not actually own the land upon which the condo complex has been built. Okay, sounds a little funny, right? Thankfully, the city has been buying up most of these leases from private individuals for a long time, and so obviously the city wants to make sure that the homeowners don't get screwed out of this land upon which their home is built. It shouldn't be too problematic. Things like that you'll want to bring up with the lender ahead of time. As long as there's a long time, more than the loan term. So if the lender is getting a 30-year loan for the buyer, as long as the land lease exceeds 30 years, it probably shouldn't be an issue. So these are the couple of instances in which it might be common to not be able to find an APN number. If you're writing an offer on a property in the county of Los Angeles, the APN number will always follow this format. It will be 4 digits, -3 digits, -3 digits. If it's anything different, either you've made a mistake or the property is located in another county. Okay. Section 2, agency disclosure. So this did change a little bit. And again, I often see this blank. That is not okay, guys. Oops. This needs to be completed. So confirmation of agency. So the seller's broker firm. This means a listing agent's brokerage. Okay. Were you raising your hand? Yeah. Listing agent's brokerage, and then the brokerage's corresponding DRE number. If you don't know what the listing agent's brokerage DRE number is, where can we find it? On the DRE website. Yeah, so there's a lookup license button, and you enter the agent's DRE number or their name, and it will show information on them, but also on their brokerage. If you happen to enter anyone's name in there, make sure you pay attention to the format it's asking for. It's last name, comma, first name. Okay, so if I put Kristen Toll in there, I'm going to find nothing. But if I put Toll Kristen, then I'm going to find myself. All right. Same thing for buyer's brokerage firm. If you're writing this, it's Keller Williams. It's you. If you have a co-listing agent that's from the same brokerage, you list the brokerage once, but both agents. Oh, and I also want to point out to you, tell you the difference between when I explain dual representation to you. So a lot of people think dual representation means I, the agent, I'm representing both buyer and seller. That is not the case. Dual representation extends to any 2 agents from the same brokerage providing representation. So if any of you wrote an offer on my listing, the dual box should be checked here, and vice versa, okay? Now, I think it's really important to, you know what, I'm not going to go into that. That's more of a listing thing. Stick on topic. So that's very important. Make sure you get that right. Now, the big change here is that they've added section 2C. More than one brokerage represents seller or buyer. Okay. And this happens. I've done last year where, one buyer sale, one listing, where I had another agent that I was co-repping with from a different brokerage. And this form, ABA, which stands for Additional Broker Acknowledgement, has always been required, but it didn't say anything about it in our contract. So unless you really know your documents, probably wouldn't be aware that you needed this, and you'd have to draft it during the course of escrow. And so what this does is, or not what this does, this form consists basically of information. How are we splitting the commissions? All the gray areas, right? If we're providing dual representation, it's not a referral fee agreement. So how do we know who's paying what, who's receiving what commission, that type of thing. So that form goes over all of that. So though it's being required on the with the RPA, obviously, if you're taking a listing, it should be done before. But if you're working with anyone as co-representation, you should probably come to an agreement as to what those terms on commission sharing and costs are going to be ahead of time. So do yourself a favor. When you start talking about co-representation, get the ABA form out and do it before you're writing offers. Okay. Last thing you want to fight about when you're trying to get an offer accepted. Yes.
What sort of circumstance would you do like a dual not representation, but
Expensive.
I'm sorry, what?
what sort of
situation?
Yeah.
So because of my position, a lot of people will come to me with unusual, difficult deals. And not just from our brokerage, but from outside brokerages as well. Or there's an agent that I've worked with who is elderly and has mobility issues. So she's asked me to come in. She knows that I have a large team and I can help with, help with a lot of the groundwork. Or yeah, just things that are difficult. And I've done more dual representation since I've been in this office. I think it's because we have such a spirit, an environment of collaboration. But if I have a seller opportunity, right? If I have a seller lead, but I can't quite close it, I would much rather bring someone in that I think would be a better match with the seller or will help me get that deal and get 50% of the commission than get 100% of zero, right? So also, as you were saying, When you have a really, really high-end listing, your costs can be exorbitant, and it can often take a very long time to sell a a mega house. It can take a year plus. So, the kind of costs associated with marketing that can be $20. So you might want some help. You might want to bring, a bigger agent with another name and a bigger credit card limit in with you, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of reasons you might want to do it. Perhaps the seller has a son or daughter who has a real estate license and they're going to force you to work with them. They have no idea what they're doing, but they definitely want their child to be the one who gets some credit and gets some money from that sale, right? So a lot of reasons you do it.
Kristen,
Okay.
does 2C cover designated agency? Is that correct? The correct term?
Designated agency?
Two people from the same brokerage, so the agent doesn't represent both sides, but the difference between dual agency versus designated
No.
agency.
Would be covered up here under section 2B here. Do you see?
Yeah.
This box? Yeah. So C, it couldn't be possible because this section C is only if there are agents from different brokerages involved.
Oh, okay.
So that wouldn't be possible. Let's see here. All right. So the really big change is this visual one here. Okay. Section D is, as it always has been, the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure and consent. These documents are always provided with all contracts, not just purchase contract, but also with listing, also with residential income. So these boxes that are already checked, the documents are going to be attached at the end of this RPA. You're not going to have to think about it. You're not going to have to remember to add them. And a lot of documents that are optional, when you click the box for them in the RPA, they will auto-populate to your transaction file within zip forms. So once you're done filling out the RPA, you'll have to remember to go back into the main file and complete the rest of the documentation that you've now added through the course of modifying this residential purchase agreement. All right, so section 3, with our beautiful box. It's pretty much set up in the same order as it was previously. 3A is purchase price. Okay, so we're gonna add the price in here, our offer price. And then if it's all cash to the right, you can click all cash, which will make some subsequent changes throughout the rest of the RPA grid box here. Close of escrow. So we have 2 options here. So the first one would be a time frame from the date of acceptance, which is more commonly used. The second is a finite date. A finite date is very tricky when you're writing an offer because you have no control over how long the potential counter or acceptance process is going to take. So if I write a finite date, yet it takes me, that's maybe 30 days from now, yet it takes me about 2 weeks to get through counters and get something accepted, I have then lost half of my escrow period. My buyer's lender, if they have a loan, most likely will not be able to complete what they need to complete in the timeframes we have available prior to closing. So finite dates are not typically used. When they are, they're usually really far off, or there's a significance of importance to that date for the buyer or seller. A lot of Chinese, Taiwanese culture, they have, cultural feelings about numbers. So I've had that instance before. The biggest thing you want to make sure of if you do need to use a finite date is, okay, based on how long I think it's going to take to get through this counter, is that time frame long enough for me to safely put that date in there? So if it's something like 45 days from the time you start writing your initial offer, probably. But that might be something you want to write as using the first option, a time frame. And in your counter offer process, when you have a better idea of when you're getting closer to an acceptance, if you need to modify it to a finite date at that point, you can add it in as a different term. Okay, so the first option, blank days after acceptance. Can anyone tell me what our most common time frame for? 30 days, that's right. Can we do more or less?
45.
We can do more or less. We can make this any time frame we want. But if your buyer has a loan, really you can't close any sooner than the lender is able to get the loan approved, issue docs, fund, so you can record, right? So if you want to try to shorten this time frame, who should you be asking first?
Lender.
buyer's lender. Can they close that quickly? Also, in the city of Los Angeles, we have some closing requirements referred to generically as retrofitting, and then we have a building report. Also, if there's an HOA, we have an HOA management company we need to obtain HOA documents from. These three things can take some time. They're not typically ordered by the listing agent prior to having an accepted offer, although if you're a great listing agent and take my listing contract class, we will talk about that, and you will have it all ready to go so you can accept all cash, non-contingent offers, and 7-day close. But in this case, it's pretty hard to close an escrow that has a loan that's in the city of Los Angeles unless the listing agent's a rock star in under about 2 weeks, okay? Maybe three for the lender for an all cash deal or something like that, or a hard money lender where the loan doesn't take a long time, probably 2 if the listing agent doesn't have these things. Right? Expiration of offer. So this used to be at the very end of our offer above the buyer's final signature line. But it's a lot clearer now, especially I think for the listing agent, to make sure they're tracking and get a response out to the buyer prior to expiration of the offer, or at least remember to counter and extend the expiration of the buyer's offer and whatever counter they issue. For those of you who are new, if all of this terminology seems like a lot and it's overwhelming, that is normal. Just keep coming. Please, how many here have experienced this? Show them, because we have a lot of new people here. Yeah, Gabby. Yeah, it's a lot. Just keep coming. Everything will start to click as long as you give this class some repetition. All of the classes also are recorded. They're online. Rewatch them. You'll get more and more out of it each time. All right, let's see here. So the expiration of offer, the way it's boilerplate written, is 3 calendar days after all buyer signatures at 5 p.m. But you can modify this. You can make it longer or shorter. All right. So yes.
I have a question on terms of jumbo loans. Because I usually have got stuff that's not that high, about 100,000. What's the typical like wait time other than cash flows?
I mean, I think that depends on your individual buyer, their finances, their type of income, how it's documented, you know, what their loan to value ratio is. That'd be a question for their lender. I don't think there is a typical. There are some some buyers that are so easily qualified, you know, there can be a full underwriting. Obviously it doesn't take as long then. So
Change because of the loan.
I mean, there are more requirements.
Yeah.
So, but you know, does it matter if there are more requirements? If you have a rock star lender and you have an easy to qualify buyer with only W-2 income, probably not. Probably easier than something under 800, but you know, they are self-employed and have multiple businesses and different tax, multiple tax returns. So not an easily answered question. It would be a case-by-case basis and you'd have to talk to that buyer's lender. Okay. Right. Initial deposit amount. All right. So there's a dollar amount here, and then now they've added a percentage as well. I think this is to help everyone out. Can anyone tell me what the typical earnest money deposit is? Yeah, it's 3%. 3%. Can you do more or less? Yeah. Yeah. If you do less, it's going to look less attractive. If you do more, it can look more attractive. But the purpose of the earnest money deposit is the leverage. Okay, it's the leverage for the seller. So this money is technically, or maybe even more theoretically, just an FYI, California real estate, particularly the RPA, is very, very buyer centric. It is buyer friendly all day long. It's not as friendly to the seller. So technically, if the buyer lifts all of their contingency protections, okay, so if a buyer cancels under a contingency protection, they should be receiving their full deposit back, okay? And I say should because legally they should, but unless everyone mutually signs, they don't necessarily receive it back. You know, if it goes to a higher authority and a buyer cancels under a protected contingency, it's going to go back to the buyer. The seller can't sell their home until they've returned the deposit and officially canceled the escrow. So, you know, even when buyers and sellers disagree, a seller finally consults an attorney or something, and they're like, yeah, you got to give the money back. You're going to lose and you're going to have to pay their legal fees. The seller will go ahead and just do it. So, cancellation isn't automatic. Yes.
I have a question. Can you open up another escrow while you're in the
No.
process of canceling?
No, you cannot.
Only one escrow?
One escrow at a time, guys. You cannot open a second until first one's canceled. Yes.
Question.
Mhm.
If you list a property and you're asking for a full price offer and someone comes along before it's finished the construction and the buyer gives you exactly what you want, a full offer, is it illegal or is it like what? Suppose the seller decides.
Come and see me after class.
Okay, I
I
don't
think
wanna
this is
take
an off topic.
Okay.
So technically, and then in the opposite direction, the buyer has removed all of their contingencies and yet fails to close, refuses to close or fails to close somehow, yet they have signed away all of their protections. Whatever dollar amount or percentage is offered in D1 is technically up for grabs by the seller, okay? We have a liquidated damages clause in our contract that stipulates that the seller cannot go for more money than is offered in this initial deposit. The initial deposit is also referred to as earnest money deposit, EMD, so it has a lot of names. There's something very special also about the initial deposit. The initial deposit has a time frame. There's a contingency time frame on this as well. The difference about this contingency timeframe is it's the only one, at least the way our contract is written, unless it's modified, that is based on business days and not calendar days. And there's a very good reason why. Can anyone take a guess?
Thanks, close on it.
Yeah, the bank is closed. How can I get my money to escrow? How can I get my deposit to escrow? I can't. So if it's a weekend or a holiday, the days don't count, right? So if Monday is a holiday, a banking holiday, and I get an offer accepted on Friday, Saturday won't count, Sunday won't count, Monday won't count. So if I leave this as 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I need to have the deposit in no later than Thursday. Make sense? Okay. Have it accepted on Thursday. I'm going to count Friday, not Saturday, not Sunday, not Monday, because we have that holiday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So make sure you take out your actual calendars that have holidays on them when you're calculating contingency timeframes for deposit. Yes.
When do you get the initial deposit from the buyer? When the offer is accepted or? when
Within
you
3
submit
business days of acceptance, unless you modify this contract. So you'll see it right here. It says within 3 business days after acceptance by wire transfer. Okay. And also wire transfer. Escrow companies only take deposit by wire transfer. Okay. I was an escrow officer. I'm dating myself back in the day when we took personal checks. And then when we only accepted cashier's checks. And thank God, I wish this had been in my day when I was still in escrow. No, they don't take ACH. ACH does not get accepted. No, wire transfer. And I've had clients who sent ACH transfer. It gets lost, it delays, it causes problems, right? And they'll do it because it's $20 cheaper. ACH doesn't work. Make sure your clients know it has to be wire. So I recently received an offer also where they checked other and they said cashier's check. And I'm like, well, I'm going to counter you, but you know, escrow won't take cashier's check, right? They just won't. Let's see here. Section D2, increased deposit. So this is an optional field. An increased deposit is not something that's typical. It's something that's used to secure a very long escrow typically, or make the offer look really attractive, possibly when there's a lot of competition. So an increased deposit means that sometime during the course of escrow, the buyer is going to deposit additional funds with escrow. The way that this is written is better than it used to be, because it used to be a time frame from acceptance. The way I preferred to modify the contract before, if I was using this option, was that the increased deposit was due within a certain time frame, business days, remember money, right? Within certain number of business days from an event, So the event I liked to use was when my buyer lifted their investigation contingency, also erroneously referred to as physical all the time. Okay, so physical is one part of investigation, and we'll go through more of that when we get to that section. And agents write physical into offers and counter offers, which I love because that means I technically, if I want a longer investigation contingency, because they wrote the word physical erroneously, all I'm modifying is one portion of my investigation. And so when they try to enforce timeframes on me, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I still have 10 more days. So, we'll get to that, but if nothing else from this class, physical is not investigation. And there's an important difference.
Or would you just write investigation?
Depends on what I want. Depends on what I want, what I'm going for.
Are you putting that on D2 somewhere?
No,
Okay. So
only
maybe
if
I
I'm
can-
using D2. I can say that here, I can say or, and a date, or 2 business days after or following removal of buyer's investigation or physical contingency or whatever contingency it is, appraisal contingency, it can be anything you want it to be. Be very careful when you custom write things into contracts. Even if it's very clear and makes sense to you, it could affect something else in the transaction, the escrow, or the terms of the contract. So you'll want to make sure anytime you freeform it, that you have someone who really knows what they're doing with contract, take a look at it to make sure that you've addressed all of the things that it could subsequently affect. All right. Let's see here. In the contract, it goes into further detail, but we can talk about it here. Increased deposit, okay? So an increased deposit requires that another form is provided to the seller and listing agent at the time or prior to when that deposit is made. And the name of it just changed. It used to be car form RID, okay? Now it is DID. Okay, so when you check this box, car form DID would auto-populate in zip forms. There are glitches in zip forms, okay? So just because it's supposed to happen does not mean that it actually did, especially when they make changes. So make sure you double check. So when I'm doing a contract, when I'm writing a contract and I have to put addendums and attachments in, if there's something that I needed. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4 has a sound off.
It is John. How did I guess? Mute him.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Can everybody at home still see the RPA?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great.
Yeah.
And I guessed it, huh? Oh, all right. So car form DID, they renamed it. And what this form does, we have this clause in our contract, liquidated damages, that limits what the seller can go after if the buyer, like I said, lifts all their contingencies yet fails to close. And so because liquidated damages is in relation to this initial deposit amount, we have a form that can indicate and legally bind that this increased deposit amount is also included in that, right?
So does the liquidated damage cover that too?
No.
If you increase the deposit?
It would cover it unless you modify it with car form DID. And I used to use this section to kind of lie to the listing agent if I was writing an offer. I would offer an increased deposit all day long, but I would not deliver car form RID, meaning that the seller could never actually go after that. The liquidated damages covered it. So it was a bluff of making my offer stronger. Because guess what? Most people don't read. If you read your contract, you're already going to be ahead of the game. Even if you don't know what it means and you ask a question about it, you're ahead of the game. Read everything that you can. Read everything that comes in, and you're going to be a better agent than anyone else. Okay,
So if you
read.
include the form, then the seller
Yeah,
can keep it.
so I used to go ahead and offer an increased deposit, not give them car form RID, and then I'm like, yay, I got one over on you. But if I was a listing agent and I saw an increased deposit, I was demanding RID with the offer. But now that it is in everyone's face, I probably won't get away with that trick so much. I told Michael Rosales, this makes it easier for the average agent, shittier for me because I can't hide stuff when I get fancy. Hands, I see hands.
Yeah, the increased deposit, you said, what percentage is that?
Usually 3%, but you can write whatever you want in it. You can write a flat dollar amount, you can write a
So
percentage.
it's an additional 3%.
Oh, for the increased deposit, whatever you want to do.
What's typical?
There's no typical. This is me trying to be atypical, trying to knock it out of the park, trying to get an escrow. You know, like I might use this when I'm writing on a flats home where there are 50 other offers, which is happening in non-flats homes now, right? This is happening in every with every listing.
Quick question.
Yes.
So does that mean that you don't have to turn that increased deposit into escrow?
Yes,
Within a certain amount of
you do.
days?
Yeah, you do.
Oh, so you turn it in, but even. if-
But
when
the
you do
seller wouldn't necessarily be able to go after it, even
Right,
if the
because you didn't
buyer
turn
completely, what's that?
Because you didn't turn
Messes-
it in.
Because I didn't turn in the form.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what's the time period? Same thing to get the increased deposit has to be within a certain. amount of
No,
time?
it's custom.
Okay.
It's custom. You can either put in a finite date or like I said, the example I used, I like to offer an increased deposit upon within a certain timeframe, business days, because remember money, of an event. So typically after the buyer has done all their inspections and I lift either the physical or the entire investigation contingency. All right.
Kristen.
Section eight, yes.
Oh, sorry. So the DID form, you're turning that in. If you turn that in with an increased deposit, then the seller can go after the increased deposit. But if you don't turn that in, then they can't. Is that correct?
I don't know because I haven't looked at the new DID form and how it's gonna, it may automatically say that unless you modify it. I don't know what it says, but I do know that it's language on there that says what it needs to say to either make it subject or to the liquidated damages protection or not. So I haven't actually looked at it. We will do a class sometime next month where I show you all of the forms that have additionally been modified. And again, Michael Rosales sent those all out to you today, so you're welcome to look at them if you have additional questions about these forms that have also been changed. But yes, it should stipulate. I just don't know how it's written, so I can't answer that.
Can't have anyone in the office that will guide you?
Read. You'll be fine if you read it. I'll tell you. They made all of these modifications to make the contract and the optional documents that are used sometimes clearer, much clearer. Every time we get a revision, things are clearer. So yeah, read it. And then if you still have a question, come and ask me. I'm happy to answer it. But like I said, I will
Very
teach a class.
bizarre. Mhm.
Very bizarre. I will teach a class sometime next month that includes at least a brief overview of all these other documents. There's a lot of them, so it won't be as in-depth. There's a lot of them, and we will look at them. All right, so let's see here. Loan amounts. So if your buyer has a loan, right, you need to write in the loan amount. We used to have to write in dollar amount on our old RPA. Because this isn't actually live yet, I haven't got to play around with how the functionality of filling it out works, but it'd be great if I could do the percentage. It'd be so much easier for me. I don't have to bust a calculator out. Why? I know if my buyer's putting down 20%, I've just offered most likely 3% for the initial deposit, which means I have to, sorry, 80. If my buyer's putting down 20%, I'm putting 80% here, which hopefully will auto-populate based upon the calculation of my offer price, that dollar amount for me, so I don't have to, while I'm driving, talking on the phone and answering questions, use my calculator 3 times to make sure I didn't fuck it up, right? My biggest mess up is usually 1 too few zeros, 1 too many zeros. So, you know, just check your numbers, but hopefully this percentage works, where it will auto calculate the number for you. I don't know. So a lot of people use this, a lot of people leave this section of E1 blank in the old version of the RPA. It was common here. I think it will still be common, but it's not a good thing to do. What this does is it provides protection to your buyer in the case that all of a sudden rates shoot up and they cannot actually obtain a loan for under a certain percentage. So if I just wrote an offer that got accepted, let's say I'm representing myself just for ease, and I'm purchasing with a loan, and I wrote in here 3.25%. And yet 2 weeks from now, something crazy happens with the economy, right? And we're in such an unstable time. I think this is more important than ever. And rates shoot up in a significant way that make me not want to purchase the home anymore. Because I wrote 3.25 in here, if anyone can get, if all I can get is 5%, I have contractual protection to cancel my contract, right? So very important. Who can you get this percentage from?
Lender.
Yeah, buyer's lender. Buyer's lender, right? I'm getting more chat questions. So to the right-hand side is conventional or effect. You'll have to indicate what type of loan. We have FHA, VA. These are not as common in our area. Why?
The price.
Prices, yeah. So there's a limit on the loan amount, right? Yay us as agents, maybe not yay us as buyers. Our home prices are so high, it's very rare that, you have a buyer who can purchase in our area with FHA or VA financing. It's not impossible, I've done it. It's a pretty normal, but slightly longer, more complicated deal. You'll become very, very good friends with your buyer's lender, so they can help walk you through the additional little steps and processes that are involved with this type of loan. Seller financing, also referred to as seller carryback financing or carryback. Okay, this is when the seller extends basically credit in lieu of a loan to the buyer, and they act as the lender. A seller can only do this if they have enough equity in the home between what they owe to the bank, if they owe anything. Let me back this up. The seller can easily do this if they have no liens on the property. They have no loan. It's called free and clear. Okay, my favorite way to be free and clear. I owe no one anything on my home. They can do this. They can still do this even if they do have a mortgage. What they need to look out for is that their purchase price is high enough in order for them to pay off their existing loan, right? Pay off their existing loan, including closing costs, commissions, all of that, because that's all taken out from the proceeds through escrow. Yes.
Can the seller finance the buyer's deposit?
No.
You cannot like get a second.
The seller would not
Mortgage.
finance a buyer's deposit. Why would I even consider a buyer who can't give me a deposit? I wouldn't. That's a very weak offer. And I most certainly don't want to make a loan for the price of my home to someone who can't even come up with an earnest money deposit, right? This is very complicated also. There's forms for it. You'll need to pull credit reports. You'll need a very experienced escrow officer to help you get the note and deed drafted. Also, this, can be risky for a seller. I've done this, I think, only once from the agent side. My client owned their property free and clear. They were retiring and they loved the idea. They're like, are you joking me? I can loan money to them at a higher interest rate. And I can, we had a balloon payment, meaning we had them pay a flat fee every month, but interest and everything all together. They were paying interest only. I think they were paying nothing on it. We just let the interest add up. And then they had one lump payment at the 5-year mark. So those buyers had to refinance, do a cash out refi, pay my seller off. But he made an extra 250 grand in 5 years by doing it that way. So it was very lucrative to him and worth the gamble. Here's the gamble with it is, what if the buyer stops paying? The foreclosure process is very technical, very lengthy and legal. So they're going to have to hire an attorney, and it's going to cost them a ton of money and take a ton of time. And so for your average person, this is, that risk is of having to go through that process on their own is quite a risk. Although, like in the instance where I did it, the buyers put down enough money, just had to borrow a small amount of difference, where they had so much equity in the home, it would have been really stupid for them to mess up and not pay him. So it was less risky for him. Yes?
But those are normally for like short term, like 2 years, 3 years.
It's custom.
Custom.
It's custom. Yeah, you write your own note and deed. There are companies that can help you do that. As an agent, we should not be getting involved in negotiating those terms, or writing those documents. What I do when I start to get in the realm of something outside of my scope of work is I play the rule of thumb of I'm a great personal assistant. Here's a recommendation to a company who does this. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's the ratings. Here's a link to their website. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed. Right? All right. Let's see here. So. Oh. That's right, 17 days after acceptance. Buyer to pay. Okay, so down here, if it is an FHA or VA loan, there is a list of lender required repairs. That is part of the process. And so I believe that it's not very clear, but this 17-day time frame, which is pretty typical time frame to leave a loan for that type of loan. FHA and VA typically take almost double the time to close. Even you'll see offers written as 30-day. Good luck with that. I hope I'm wrong, but good luck with that. So 17 days for that. So that this time frame is associated with this term right here. E2, additional financed amount. Okay, so additional financed amount, it's very much like the initial loan, but a buyer can finance different ways. They can have more than one loan. It's not very typical to write an offer in this fashion, even if that's what the buyer ends up doing to purchase. It's a pretty complicated process, usually for specific reasons or difficulty obtaining loans, or the type of the way you're structuring the financing. This is not something you typically use unless the lender is specifically telling you it needs to be written this way, which they probably wouldn't. They don't really know. They're going to play with it and it might end up this way. It is okay if a buyer's loan terms change. It is not okay for you to write an all cash offer and then have a loan come in. Okay. The seller, that's fraud, right? That's fraud. Now there is a way to write it optionally. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. There is a way to write it optionally where when you have a buyer who's able to purchase it with or without a loan, but would like to reserve the right to do so. And you can sort of retain the strength of a cash offer by making it contingency free. And I'll give you the language for that situation in a moment. So this wouldn't typically be used, but as the market shifts and changes, you might see it happen more and more. But again, you're probably not going to know this at the time you start a transaction. So yeah, loan dollar amounts change. If you're ever writing it in a misleading way on purpose, that's the difference between whether or not it was okay or not. The buyer might have every intention of putting 20% down, but then they find out, oh, they can put less money down and get an even slightly lower interest rate. If they do 10%, that's going to be okay. Even if the listing agent and seller were mad about it, most of the time when people find out, it's when loan docs are ready to be issued and no one gives a fuck about anything then, because you're signing and closing. Everyone's happy. Yes.
You want to make it stronger and put back.
That's called fraud. I don't even want to hear what you're about to say. And I have no comment. Let's see here. So occupancy type E3 is also really important because lenders, they provide different interest rates and terms to a buyer, based upon whether or not they're going to live there. Okay, so if it's going to be an investment or secondary, and this is also different. It used to just be, will they be occupying the property or not? Okay, but I think they got more specific because see the secondary? Secondary is owner occupied, right? So it would be very easy to accidentally mark something as owner occupied when actually it has different requirements because it's a secondary home. Okay, and now we have investments. So now we have three options: primary, and which is the way it is boilerplate written unless we check one of these two. Balance of down payment. Okay, so when you have a total down payment, let's say buyers getting an 80% loan, putting 20% down, we have to remember we've already offered a portion of our total down payment money in our earnest money deposit. So if we've offered 3, but we're going to put a total of 20, we're going to write 17 here. If we've offered 5, or if we've offered an increased deposit, all of that's going to be, the percentage will be added and subtracted from the total portion down. And a lot of people get confused when I talk about this. So we will do this real quick. If we have a 1 million purchase price, we put 20 down and get, you can't see it. Okay, never mind. You wanna see it, please? Okay, yeah, there's another marker. Maybe the blue will be better. So if we have a 1 million, no,
Just press on it a little bit more.
sign language, I don't know.
You can see it.
Yeah.
We need new markers? Yeah. When in doubt, take out a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, guys. I think because I came from escrow, like very old school, a lot of financial stuff. I still do this. I feel like I'm very blessed. I got paper, pen, library, and computer and internet. But don't be lazy. Print these things out. All of the terms, every word in your contract, every number is so important. And I'm sorry, when you're flipping between screens and there's multiple versions there, it's very easy to miss something, very easy to forget you're looking at the wrong window. Print it out, write on it, look at it, highlight it, keep a copy with you. You know, that mistake in this section of the RPA is really detrimental. If it's not detrimental and your buyer catches it, very embarrassing, right? Or even more embarrassing, neither of you catch it, but the listing agent does and says, oh, did you really mean to offer me an extra $1 million? I've been on both sides of it. Yes.
So question, balance of down payment, if it's $1 million, you've already given the 3%.
Mm-hmm,
So that's the 30,000.
mm-hmm.
So you would, because they've already given you the 30, you wouldn't add that 30 onto. the
No,
whole
it would be
balance, you just wouldn't
170
subtract
if it was an 80-20. Yeah.
it. Okay.
80% loan, 20% down total. If
Okay.
it's $1 million purchase price,
Right.
I've already offered 3% deposit for the earnest money, that's 30,000.
Yeah.
So if my total down payment is 200,000, I've already put in 30. So
Yeah.
200 minus 30 is gonna be 170,000 for my balance of down payment. Yep.
And if you increase the deposit, you deduct that too, right?
Yes, if there's an increased deposit, that would also be a portion of the total down payment. All right, page 2, here we are. 5E, seller credit, if any, to buyer. It's not very customary in our market for us to pre-negotiate credits through an initial offer. Does it happen? Yes. It's very common in other states, and I'll have, out-of-state buyers come in and they're like, yeah, so the seller is going to give me a credit for my closing costs. No, honey, no, I'm really sorry. They're not. They're really not. Let's focus on getting you the property because there's 30 other buyers who wrote an offer too. That might flip, that might switch if it's a buyer's market. So if it's a buyer's market, why would the seller per se agree to a credit to the buyer versus just reducing the purchase price? The difference is the buyer would have to come in with less actual cash to closing. Okay, so that's the reason for this term. That'd be a consideration in what you ask for, how you ask for it, why you ask for it, that kind of thing. Lenders do limit the amount of credit a buyer can receive and what it can be applied towards. So credits cannot be endlessly large. So if I need to do a large credit, I need to talk to the buyer's lender and say, hey, we've negotiated a credit of 100 grand. I'm guessing that the buyer can't receive 100 grand because they don't have enough non-recurring closing costs. It's okay, you don't have to know what that is, in order to absorb $100,000 credit. And they will say, you're right. You can do 30,000, which means what? I probably need to go ahead and do a combination of reduction of purchase price and credit. But as I reduce the purchase price, the closing costs that credit can be applied toward to are going to diminish slightly. So it's a balancing act. So I don't just say, oh, 30,000, let's decrease the price by 70. I say to the lender, okay, let's work on this. What do I need to write? And I just ask the lender to kind of give me those numbers. Let's see here. So not very typical, but that can be written in. Additional finance terms. Remember, I told you I was going to give you the language for writing an offer with the option of purchasing it cash or a loan and still having, nearly the weight of a cash offer. I'm going to tell you the language I use to do that now. This is very common with investors and high net worth individuals. buyer reserves the right, and I'll type this into the chat box for those of you at home. I think I can figure this out. Gabby, how do I do it? How do I make my box big so I can see it? Top. This? Exit. I don't think so. Ah, here it is. I just have to hover over. All right, so buyer reserves the right to obtain contingency-free financing at their sole election or discretion, whichever word you prefer. Okay, buyer reserves the right to obtain contingency-free financing at their sole discretion or election. And what this does is it contractually is binding the seller to cooperate with providing the information and documents necessary to obtain and process the loan. And yet it is not providing the buyer any protection in the case that they don't qualify for a loan, right? That's why it retains nearly the weight of an all cash offer is if they cannot obtain the loan, they are still going to be contractually obligated to complete the purchase all cash.
Mr. What's the implication if you're a seller, this appears on an offer?
If you're a seller,
If I'm the agent for a seller, I should say, what's the implication?
it's great. It's a strong buyer. You're going to see a proof of funds for the entire purchase price. So you know they have the cash.
Right.
All it is it's nothing really for you.
Oh,
Sometimes if it was anything to you, it might be that, you know, the lender gets picky about some language and you have to draft an additional addendum or reword something for them. But most of the time that's not the case. Nothing to you. It's a lot more work for the escrow company and the title company. Do I have?
And you would only,
Oh. There we go. Was there a question at home?
yes, I did have a question, Kristen. On the other side, if you were to fill in G2, writing what you just sent us, would that be only if you were to put all cash on the previous page?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If your buyer doesn't truly have the ability to purchase all cash, what is it if you write that in here? Fraud. It is fraud. It is not okay. You cannot lie.
But they're gonna ask for proof of
Gray
funds
area is
anyway.
my favorite. Omission is my favorite. Specific words are my favorite, right? Yeah.
How can the buyer lies? The seller is gonna ask for proof of funds. So if he doesn't have the cash, how he's not gonna come up with?
Yeah, proof of funds is required.
So
But
how
you
can
can
he lie?
have a proof of funds, write it that way and the buyer can have no intention ever
Oh,
of
okay.
purchasing it cash. That's
Okay.
fraud. Yeah, that's fraud. Yes.
But if you put, let's say, you said fraud, let's say put 30% down, but but.
You already tried to ask me this question one way. I'm not answering it on camera. We'll talk about it after class. But yes, I do it too.
Hi, could I have Josh Spisson email address?
Are you talking to me? Okay, we're muting you. I'm like, I'm not a secretary. How do I get rid of this thing? Okay. Oh, people call me. They're like, can I have Armand's cell phone number? I'm like, get on fucking Google, call the office. Who do you think I am? Do I work for you? Are you paying me? I don't think you can afford it. We have questions? Yes,
Yeah,
no.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Buyer reserves the right to obtain contingency free funding.
Financing
Uh,
at their,
So meaning if they check all cash,
they don't have any protection. If they don't obtain the loan, they'll be forced to purchase the property cash.
gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay.
Otherwise, you just use the normal loan purchase section. Yes.
So I'm an investor using our money lender. who's provided-
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm an investor using our money loan lender. So they provide a proof of funds letter that I can use as my
All cash.
Yep.
all cash offer. But
Okay.
I want to still have the option to,
That's right. So this
Finance
language is right up
someone.
your alley,
so that puts me in a better position
Mhm.
to get an offer. So,
especially if something goes awry.
Right.
It's just extra protection. Also, you'll look pretty fancy.
Mhm.
Let's see. So, section HI or H1, verification all cash. I love this. Okay, there used to be a box and people would forget to check it, that where you as the agent indicated my buyer's proof of funds is attached. Or even better yet, my favorite is when they meant to not check it and there is no proof of funds. An offer without proof of funds for the entirety of the down payment, plus technically it's supposed to be for closing costs as well, which for a buyer can range anywhere from like 1 to 2.5% higher if they have a loan, lower if it's cash, or 1.5 to 2.5%, depending upon loan or cash. So down payment, proof of down payment should show not only down payment funds, but also proof of closing costs. Okay, so more. It now is written to where it's attached to the offer, boilerplate. Because why? It should be attached to the offer. Your offer is absolutely worthless to me unless I see a proof of funds. Why on earth would I ever accept your offer if I don't know that you have the ability to actually purchase it? I can't offer it to anyone else at that time, right? So proof of funds should be attached. You have this option for or 3 days after acceptance. You know, I've had this happen once. Maybe I had a high net worth person who had a business manager who was on a boat somewhere, but I worked for a really big agent at the time who knew the other really big agent and knew we wouldn't waste our time with someone who didn't have money. You know, but we verbally negotiated that. Please do not write or deliver offers without your proof of funds. Please do not waste your time on a buyer who will not give you proof of funds, or what's our alternative? If they won't give you a proof of funds, what's the only other acceptable proof of ability to purchase? A letter from their, you can go ahead,
Lender.
Gabby.
Yeah.
No, not pre-approval. From their actual banking institution saying, yeah, saying they have the ability to purchase this home. Yeah, a wealth manager could do that as well. A wealth manager could do that as well. All right, let's see here. So that goes for verification of all cash and verification of down payment. Same thing. Whatever money you need to show, and it needs to be delivered with the offer. Now, section H3, verification of loan application. Again, if your buyer's purchasing with a loan, their pre-approval or pre-qualification needs to be attached to the offer. These used to be something you had to go and check. Now, the way our contract is written, you don't have to check a box, so you won't forget to do it. And then on the right-hand side, it's asking you to indicate whether or not there's pre-qualification, pre-approval, or fully underwritten pre-approval. We will talk very briefly about what these are. Don't get hung up on it. It's okay. Pre-qualification is, you know, maybe anything prior to actually running a 1003 loan application through, you know, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac's submission system. Okay. So does that mean that pre-qualification is worthless? Not really. I mean, you work with a good lender, your buyer's giving them information. They have a pretty good idea, as long as they're decent at their job, if that buyer can qualify for and obtain a loan. Now, what's pre-approval? Pre-approval is just whatever they told me. We put on the loan application, they signed it, they gave me permission to run it through this machine if I'm the lender. I run it through, and those two large lending institutions told me, yeah, they should be able to qualify for a loan. Does that mean that they will? Absolutely not.
No, yeah.
Absolutely not. There's a lot more variables to it, and the underwriter and bank can decide that they want to look at things that are not actually required by the bank or by law. Okay, so you can get good underwriters, bad underwriters. Very important you have a very good lender that you're associated with, and try to push your buyers to use that person. It will save you so much headache, so much heartache, so much stress. Yes.
If I'm selling in a hot market, okay, why wouldn't I ask for either fully underwritten or cross qualification? Because like you said, somebody can give you pre-approval and doesn't.
Yeah, you
close and
can
waste your
ask for
time.
it, and I've seen it quite a bit. So fully underwritten pre-approval is the best. It means credit's actually been run. It means some supporting documents supporting what the borrower has put on their loan application have actually been submitted. And so, and you know, like I said, credit's been pooled. This is also referred to as DU, direct underwriting. This is the first layer of underwriting. Does this mean that a buyer is going to still be able to 100% obtain a loan? Hell no, it doesn't. DU is a pretty strong indicator, but it is not finite because you can get a bad underwriter, or you can have an inexperienced lender who accidentally submits more things than they need to, which leads to questions. It does not mean that the loan is solid. Okay, it's a stronger indicator. So I really base my assessment and my recommendations to my sellers as far as the buyer's ability to purchase. I base it a lot in conjunction with these items. I base it a lot more heavily on my conversation with the buyer's lender. I never accept an offer. In fact, I generally won't even counter a buyer until I've spoken with their lender directly myself. I felt them out. I've asked them about the loan terms and the buyer's credit, ability to purchase and obtain.
I've got a quick question. I'm sorry to cut you off.
course.
So if I've got the pre-qualification letter, I've got the proof of funds, am I just leaving everything in this section blank except for the pre-approval check on 6B? Okay.
So as far as cross-qualification isn't something a buyer would, or a buyer's agent would write into an offer. Fuck that. I don't want to go through that. My buyer doesn't want to deal with that. So even if someone's asking me for cross-qualification, I tell them, no, I'll get my buyer to give our lender permission to give you the fully underwritten pre-approval that's here, or do you? They may look at that and will redact, social security numbers and bank account numbers. It's none of their business. I see that a lot of times in lower end homes. Why? They're shady. They want the business. They want control over it. I don't want my buyer working with anyone affiliated with a listing agent. They should be working with their own people through and through. All right, intentionally left blank. Great. That's just to give us some spacing in the sections. Section J16, final verification of condition, also referred to what? As what, guys? Go ahead, Gabby. I'm not gonna. Final walkthrough.
Final walkthrough.
That's right. And what CAR form is associated with the final walkthrough? VP, what stands for what? What does that stand for? VP.
Verification.
Yeah, I hear it at home. What?
Verification of property.
Yes, ma'am. Verification of property conditions. So what is the purpose of the final walkthrough? It is to make sure that the property is in the same condition, or generally the same condition, as it was at the time the offer was made and accepted. Okay. Basically, when the seller moved out, did they, accidentally make huge holes in the walls, ceilings, and doors? Did they break stuff? Did they make the repairs they were supposed to? Although, don't you dare wait until the final walkthrough to verify that agreed upon repairs were made. Be a good agent and make sure of that way ahead of time, because the final walkthrough takes place unless the contract is modified within the last 5 days prior to close, which means that we have 2 of those days, can't really do anything about funding and closing. Okay. We might not want to fund and close, although you don't technically have leverage the way our contract is written. If there is damage you weren't expecting, to hold up funding and closing, but most agents don't know that. And what are they going to do about it anyways? Serve me a notice to perform? Or in that case, it's going to be a demand to close. Very similar documents.
I had
Yes.
funds one time. I was buying my house all cash and the plumbing, the heating, so I was able to hold some of their cash until they fix the problem. So you can ask for that.
Yeah, that's that wouldn't be covered in our contract. That would be something that's negotiated as a hold and escrow after the close of escrow. Yeah. Yeah, you can work it out a bunch of different ways. I just want you guys to know that contractually, we don't have the legal standing to hold up funding or closing because of the condition or because of the failure to complete repairs.
Okay.
But huff and puff and you'll still probably get your way. They won't know and you can threaten them. Yeah, most sellers are willing to do whatever it takes because guess what? It's just as much of a shock, surprise, and headache to them as it is to you that damage was caused. And they are clearly already moving or halfway out because that's how the damage was caused, it's not like they're going to be okay if you just refuse to close on their home. They've already moved out. They've already paid money. They've already secured their next, living situation. So most sellers and listing agents are very willing to play ball and resolve the problem with you then. But do yourself a favor and check in at least a week earlier than that to see if repairs are started and made. Talk to the listing agent, make sure they're taking care of it. Assignment requests. So remember
What do you write in there, 5 days?
I leave it. Yeah, 5 days is normal. If anything should be changed on here, if anything is other than what's written in here, boilerplate is customary in our market, I'll point it out to you, and there'll be quite a few. And these things change based upon whether or not it's a seller's market or a buyer's market. Okay, but I'll point them out to you. So the days that are in here, can you change them? Yes. Is it typically changed? No. You can change it if you want to. The less stuff you change, unless it's in the seller's favor, the more attractive your offer is, which is a really important thing, at least in the the environment that we're working in at the moment. I do teach a whole class on how to get your offer accepted in multiples. So I'll go through in great detail the little tricks that I use, the things that are you have to watch out for, the things that are risky, the things that are not as risky. All right, so let's see here. Assignment request. Remember I talked to you about the buyer name when you're making the offer and the entities. So let's say that I'm purchasing and we wrote the offer in my name, okay? And 2 weeks down the road, I find out that my lender's totally okay with me purchasing in the name of my trust, and that's great because I don't want to go through the hassle of having to deed the property into my trust after I close or make sure it's done properly. So what do I need to do? Technically, I need to assign, the property, the purchase contract, the deal from myself as an individual to my trust. And you can see correspondingly under, so all of this stuff on the grid, like J16, K23, you'll see, you can come down to, where's it, 23, okay? 23, okay? So it was section 23 in the grid. You'll find further explanation and instruction in the corresponding paragraph subsequently further in the purchase contract. I will say, and you'll find out, because assignment's a general term, I could just assign to any random person, and that's actually illegal. A lot of people go around kind of committing fraud that way. What do I mean by that is, maybe you have somebody who's like, I'm going to tie this property up in escrow because it's great, but I have no intention of buying it. It's worth way more than I offered for it too. So now I'm going to go to developer clients and I'm going to sell my escrow to them. Basically, I'm going to try to make money out of a deal that has nothing to do with me. I'm going to commit fraud and write an offer and lock up a poor seller in escrow when I have no intention of ever purchasing this property. That's why we don't allow typical assignment. But assignment is such a general term. That's a bad type of assignment. That's the illegal type of assignment. Assignment also means I'm just transferring. Maybe I'm even adding a buyer or seller, which is not necessarily covered as a protected activity, during escrow, but most people will let you add someone on during the purchase, right? If you're a seller and I'm buying your house, but I find out I need my husband on it as well to qualify for the loan, you're probably going to let me put my husband on because you want me to close my deal with you. So assignment, it says very clearly here that the buyer has to disclose the name of all assignees. And if there's any monetary consideration, so that's a bad kind of assignment. The only kind that's allowed is to buyer's own trust or any wholly owned entity. So if there's an LLC that has 2 managing signers, technically this paragraph doesn't cover that situation. What do? Well, the buyer discloses it basically in an addendum to the contract. Make sure that the seller's aware of this and they'll sign off on it and then you're all good, right? If the seller allows it, it's okay. It's when you don't disclose it and the seller's not okay with it that it's not okay. Yes?
Does it matter if it's an irrevocable or revocable trust? Okay.
I mean, an irrevocable trust can't be modified in any way, so I wouldn't think that you could purchase or sell anything. But I don't know. Every trust is written different, custom, so you'd have to refer to the trust. And if you had further questions about it, you need to speak to an estate attorney. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So I have this buyer who wants to purchase somebody else's property, but this person needs to buy the property. So my buyer is gonna buy the property cash and then assign it to this person who's gonna buy the property. So is that
Unless you disclose it to the seller and they agree, it is illegal.
it is legal?
It is not legal unless you disclose it and the seller is okay with it.
Write it in the contract.
You disclose it.
But it says or assignee.
That doesn't cover it.
That doesn't cover it.
Yeah, or assignee only covers if you're the same party, right? Same party. But like I said, does the seller care? Like, would you care if I wrote an offer on your property and then I decided I wanted to put it under the name of my LLC and I have a business partner and me and my business partner co-own that LLC? You're not going to care. You're not going to care. It just has to be disclosed. And define disclosure, because technically a buyer vesting amendment or an explanation or an email can qualify as disclosure as well, but there is a very formal form for disclosure. Here, I'll show you real quick. And this is when you're, so the way our contract is structured now, this page with the grid covers everything. But if you don't fully understand the corresponding paragraphs that go to those items in the grid, you're cheating yourself. So we're only going over the grid because it's in one place. It's easy for me to explain to you, but please print this out, read it, know it, learn it, ask questions. Okay, ask questions. I want to come in here next class and I want you all to have multiple questions for me. Okay, read this. Let's see, 23. All right, so 23, here's the CAR form, AOAA. So if you use that form, Janet, you'd be just fine. Here. I think I'm going to stop at 1:30 because I think it's hard to retain too much all at once, but I think we are maybe a little bit more than halfway through it. So we should be able to complete this by the next class. And I think I'll highlight some of the important things and references to CAR forms that might be used if you're, modifying these terms in a special way. And then I can put a link up just so you can maybe have something to refer to of things that you should study and additional documents you should also look at or consider. Okay, so section L, now we're getting into the contingencies. All right, so loan and appraisal. I always talk about these together. Why? Even if you don't have an appraisal contingency, in order to obtain a loan, you're still going to have an appraisal. And it's either going to have to appraise or a buyer is going to have to come in with additional money to make a difference between an appraised price and an accepted purchase price, or buyer and seller are going to have to negotiate to reduce the purchase price, or they can completely disagree and cancel the deal. Not technically if they don't have an appraisal contingency. You can't cancel a deal as a buyer, or you're not supposed to. If you have an appraisal, it doesn't appraise, but you've waived your appraisal contingency, you've lifted that, right? So can we still get away with it? Yes, we just have to hide it under another contingency, and it's not going to be the loan contingency because that's going to be very obvious. So if I need to write an offer with no appraisal contingency, I need to hide that appraisal under the protection of my buyer's investigation contingency. Specifically, the easiest is physical inspection contingency. What does that mean? It means I can walk into a building as a buyer. I can think the hallway smells funny. A butterfly can land on my shoulder. I don't like bugs. I can hear a funny noise that no one else hears, and I can decide not to buy that property, and I am legally protected. Okay, so that's how we can do these kinds of things. So I digress. That's a whole other class, how to make your offer more attractive, get accepted in multiples. But loan and appraisal are intertied. An appraisal has to take place. Okay, this means an appraiser coordinates with the listing agent. They schedule a time to go there physically. They go and do the appraisal, and you may have a great appraiser who works hard. You may have a shitty one that doesn't work hard. You may have one that gets sick or is really busy. So from the time they actually perform the appraisal to the time they provide the written report, that can be a day, that can be 2 days, that can be several days. It's not supposed to be, but it can be several days. So as a buyer's agent or as a listing agent, you want to make sure that the appraisal takes place, you know, within the first week, maybe tops week and a half of your escrow. And this is because once that report's given to the bank, there's a completely individual section of the bank. It's an underwriting department just for appraisal review. And that's because the bank is very concerned about their investment and they want to make sure that no one gets to influence that appraisal underwriting department in any way. Once that report is provided by the appraiser to that special department, it usually takes them about 3 days to review it and give formal approval on the appraisal. So if, you know, we wait until day 10 and it can take a minimum of 3+ days for that formal approval process to happen on the appraisal. You know, I'm cutting it really close because for most appraisals right now, what's the industry standard contingency timeframe for an appraisal?
17 days.
Oh, 14. And a lot of times even less. If you're going to shorten appraisal or loan contingency, you need to make sure the buyer's lender is okay with that. Okay. If your buyer's lender needs 17 days to get an appraisal done, get them the fuck out of there. Tell your buyer they are worthless and get them to work with a different one. Okay. An appraisal contingency is anywhere typically 10 to 14 days right now. And it's really important how it affects the loan, because what I will see is I will see people leave appraisal at 17 or maybe shorten it to 14, and then they will write the loan contingency the same time frame. That is not possible. You need that appraisal approval at least a few days prior to when you can get your loan approval. Typically 3 days. So yeah, if I have a 17-day loan contingency, what should my appraisal be? If I have a 10-day appraisal contingency, what is the shortest my loan contingency can be, given that my lender can actually perform? No, 13. I did it, I reversed it. I'm trying to fuck with you guys. You guys paying attention? Yeah, so there's that relationship there. I want to see 3 to 4 days longer on the loan contingency than the appraisal. Okay, it should never be the same. You're setting yourself up for failure. You might make the appraisal, but you might win the battle, but you're going to lose the war, because the loan approval and lifting that contingency is usually valued much more highly than the appraisal is by the listing agent and seller. Okay. All right. We're going to leave it at that. Yeah, guys. Yeah, we're gonna end class at that. I'll be here for questions. Those of you at home, I have a bunch of questions in the office. So if it's okay with you, I'm gonna type my email address into the chat. Please don't send me your question. Those of you at home, please email me for a time to discuss over the phone your question. If anyone's answering a real estate question for you in text or email, they have too much fucking time in their hands or they're answering incorrectly. Hi.
My name is Richard.
Hi, Richard. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm visiting.
Yeah. How do you get a copy? It's available all over the internet. You're welcome to have this copy if you like.
I'm put it to good use.
Good. Kristen.
Kristen, can you scroll down for your email?
Your email.
Oh, yeah.
So how many pages is it?
Oh, gosh.
It is, how many pages? I don't know. I didn't look at that.
Oh,
It'll say on there.
all right, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
What is your next show?
My classes are always Thursday at noon. So next Thursday at noon. And you can access my training calendar and everyone else's training classes on the kwbh.virtual calendar we have. kwbhvirtual.com, sorry. Okay, my email address is Kristen, RISTEN at LA for Los Angeles, native dot homes, homes with an S. So
So
it's
it's
Kristen,
Kristen,
CHRIS.
CHRIS.
Huh?
CHRIS.
CHRISTEN at LA native dot homes.
Native.com, say what?
Dot homes, not com.
Dot homes. plural.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When's your next class?
Thursday at noon, always Thursday.
Thursday noon. I'll be wonderful. Great job.
Pleasure to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
I'm Harris, by the way.
Hi, Harris.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well.
Hi, Kristen, I'm Ian.
Hi,
I
Ian.
just want to say thank you for an informative and entertaining class.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm new here, so I'll be back attending the classes. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Hi.
Thank you, Michael. Nice to
Michael,
meet
pleasure
you.
to meet
Thank
you.
For the class.
You're
Very
welcome.
informative.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, darling. How you doing? Nice to see you too.
Kristen, is it true that you also set up the mentorship?
Yep. I run the mentorship
Do you
program.
have a card?
I do. I can take you back to my office. Gabby, would you mind grabbing my purse from the office for me, please? Thank you. honey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I'll be here in February. I'm just doing pre-stuff.
Good.
In advance, I want to be running, or at least walking by then.
All of my classes, multiple versions of them are recorded and they're on YouTube if you search my name.
Wonderful. That's great. So they have the whole virtual version of everything.
Yes, I'm not an employee of KW. I don't allow them to broadcast it, so I have my own YouTube channel. It's not protected. All you have to do is search my name. I work here, but I'm not an employee.
Gotcha. Oh, wonderful.
By design, on purpose. You have to have the cow in order to have the milk.
There we go.
Yeah.
Smart.
Thanks.
Okay, Kristen, I'll see you.
Yeah.
Are you gonna be here for the next class at 2?
No, I have one of my team agents' birthday lunch.
Okay, okay, well, see you soon.
Thank you, honey. Thank you. I appreciate it.
It was very nice to meet you.
Pleasure
And I'll
to
be
meet
in
you as
touch.
well.
Thank you very much. I'll see you.
Take care.
All this new stuff. Like I stepped away for 3 years and it's like.
I know. It's constantly changing, so that's what I like about it.
I love your skin. Is it like tan or?
Me?
Yeah, it looks gorgeous.
I mean, I Botox the fuck out of everything.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'm trying to raise my eyebrows.
And then when I go for my auditions, I'm like, I can't even read you because you don't even have anything like.
Yeah. Pleasure to meet you. Hey, guys at home, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off now, unless you have questions.
Oh, thanks, Kristen.
Welcome. Bye, guys.